Hello my loves, I'm Jessie Moon6, your sister in the craft, and this is the melting pot. I'm going to try to keep today's intro short because I have a lot of ground that I want to cover with you today, but I just have to say for one quick second, thank you so much again for sharing your energy with me and being a part of my path and allowing me to be a part of yours. I am so excited to be approaching this huge milestone for me and my channel, coming up on 200 subscribers, and this has just been such a beautiful experience for me. Sorry, let me move this smoke. I'm just really excited to see where the future of this channel goes. I have so many topics that I want to explore. I have been kind of diving into some new stuff personally in my own craft, and I'm really excited to learn about this so someday I can hopefully teach you about what I'm learning now in the future. But I wanted to say thank you so much for just being here and being a part of this journey. That being said, let's dive right in. As you can see from the title of this video, today I want to cover the different aspects of jar spells. Jar spells are huge and early on in the craft. I feel it's a very common practice for witches who are just getting started in their craft to begin with a first spell being something like a jar spell or a bottle spell. Sometimes they're called witches' bottles. I'm sure they have many other names. But today I wanted to cover some of the different aspects that I haven't seen as much information on. I just think it's important to know all the different ways that these can be utilized in our craft. I think also it's kind of underestimated when it comes to witches who are more advanced in their practice, because whereas I don't sit down and actually craft spell jars for specific things very often anymore, I make tiny little spell jars for warding everywhere. Like, I have them outside the house, I have them in my car, I have them for my altar, I have them for different reasons. I found that the more I grow in my craft and my practice, the smaller my jars have gotten. But it's still something that has been a very powerful tool for me, and I don't think it should be written off as just, something for beginners to play around with. There are very powerful results hidden behind these types of spells, and they've been practiced throughout many different cultures throughout history. So I want to just touch on a few different aspects, and I wanted to sit down and craft one with you. First off, with the jar spells, I think I'm going to tackle is how do they work, or how do people believe they work? And the answer isn't the same for everyone. There are kind of a few different ways of looking at this. One of these ways is believed to be more supernatural, aligned with, elemental energies, using energies of plants with their corresponding purposes, and putting them into this vessel, and maybe adding a sigil or a bay leaf with an intention, and, charging that, and it kind of traps all those different energies in there. Hi, kitty! To kind of charge it and make it more powerful over time. And some witches believe this is how they get their results from spell jars, whereas other witches may believe that they get their results because of a psychological aspect, which by that I mean, have you ever heard that if you write your goals down, you're statistically more likely to achieve them? So think of it like this. You're getting into a meditative state, and you're assigning meaning and purpose to each of these ingredients or items that you're putting into the jar, kind of just like setting goals, only you're not writing them, you're assigning an item to them. And then you're placing them into the jar, and it's not, you don't believe, it's after sitting down and building your intentions and getting into that meditative state and building your jar spell based around an intention, you would then place it somewhere where you're going to see it a lot. And they believe that subconsciously you're more likely to be driven to get that thing that you're trying to draw in, so to speak. So there's different ways, and that's only 2 ways of looking at it, and I'm sure there are many, many more. And if you have a different take on it, I would love to hear your spin in the comments below. Either way, I am seeing from both of these communities of witches that they feel they are getting results, and that's what matters. So it doesn't really matter how you're getting there, it's what you're connecting with and what you're having the most success with. So if you don't click or jive with the supernatural, more mystical belief of the jar spell, you can look at it from a more psychological standpoint and still have satisfactory results. The next thing that I wanted to talk about before we start crafting is the ingredients that we use inside the spells themselves. There are also different views on this. There are some who believe that each herb or each plant or item like acorns or certain crystals or stones, they have assigned specific meanings to these items. I guess they call them magical properties when this is how they're looking at it. And they don't consider it just to be an intention, but they believe that this plant carries certain magical properties in line with certain intentions. So there's that aspect of looking at it where you think like each herb has a specific meaning. Chamomile for healing, basil for luck, or lavender for peace, different things like that. Or there's the more chaos magician theory of looking at things, and they believe that it doesn't really matter what herbs that you're using or what you're putting in it so much, not that they have a magical property. They believe more so that it's the intention, it's setting the intention. So by telling each plant this is what your job is, that's what matters, and they think that that's how they get the results. And again, I've seen both communities talking about results, and I would have to say I fall somewhere in between. When I first started, I leaned a lot more on the magical properties of each individual plant, and then as I went on, I began to think about how when I do these jar spells with these specific plants, I am assigning them a job anyways. I have to tell each item what it is that I am asking them to help me with. And, there are certain plants that have medicinal aspects tied to them, or properties tied to them, truly, that are not deniable. But some of these properties are just simply been appointed by us, so they're not necessarily concrete or in stone. We aren't for certain that a rose is for love. That's just what it makes us feel. So I when I looked at it that way, I started to kind of fall somewhere in between. Tails, I don't want you to catch fire, buddy. So I would probably say I fall somewhere in between the two. And whatever works for you. Again, I've seen results. It's the believing and the having that perfect love and perfect trust. And it's a lot like manifesting. And I know that's like a buzzword in the community and it's almost laughable at times. But manifestation is truly powerful. And it is something that we use in almost every spell that we do. We are trying to set an intention and we're trying to draw it in with certain tools or certain help from outside forces beyond ourselves, partnered with the energy within ourselves to kind of charge what we already have. So no matter how you look at it, I promise you can still get powerful results. And today I'm going to be showing you one way that you can craft a spell. And as I said, there are many different practices. So whatever you're doing, just as long as you're informed, you're being respectful, and you're doing your research and you're making sure you're safe, then that's all that really is truly important here. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to switch everything over so you can see a little better, and we're going to get started on our spell jars. Hopefully you can see everything that's going on pretty good. Okay, at least I hope. I know my camera is not the greatest, but hopefully you can kind of get an idea of what's going on here. So you're gonna need a jar, and it doesn't have to be a cute little pretty jar. Whatever you have on hand is gonna work. This right here is an old apple juice jar. This right here is an old spaghetti jar. See, work with what you have as long as you're cleansing it. I'm all about being a practical witch. I would suggest trying to use a smaller one just for sake of being frugal with your ingredients. You don't want to use the majority of your collection of herbs all in one spell. I would suggest something at least this small. When I am making wards or protections for the house, I go even smaller with something this size, and I will hang them from a tree. I'll also insert some clips of those here as well. If you want a tutorial on how to utilize them within your wards, or what I use to make them, just drop a comment below and I'd be happy to help you get started with that. Protection is a very, very important part of your practice, and you really shouldn't get started with any spell work until you have a basic understanding of how to protect yourself, right? That's very important, how to cleanse, how to protect and ward and banish and all of the things. So, got off topic there, but you're gonna need a jar. Today, and again, this is just what I'm using. There are tons of different things that you can use. Ouch. Tails. If you want to take the more chaos magic approach where you're not too concerned, it's more about your intention, then you can utilize whatever you have at home. I'm going to be doing a combination of both today. So again, it's whatever works for you. I just wanted to share with you a breakdown. Like I said, there are many different ways of doing this. This is one way that you can do it, and I hope that it gives you at least kind of a basic understanding of where to get started. And if this is the beginning of your research, hopefully at the end of this video you'll feel pretty confident about your knowledge on the basics of jar spells, but I still urge you to look into the other practices and different ways of making them and utilizing them within your craft and your culture if it calls for it. So let's get started. Whenever I use any jar, before I get started, I always like to cleanse it. There are different ways you can do this. You can cleanse with smoke, you can cleanse with water. If you're going to be using any herbs, any flowers, anything like that, they need to be dried, because if they're not dry, they're going to cause mold within your jar, which is you don't want a moldy spell jar, especially for something you're trying to draw in. That kind of gives the opposite effect, right? That's a negative, it's having a negative effect on it. To avoid that, it is best to use dried herbs. As I said, today I'm going to be using both methods of incorporating the magical properties that I know about these plants and new ones that I'm going to assign. So after you've cleansed your jar, I'm going to start with a base of sugar, and as I add each ingredient, I'm going to tell it what it is for. And if, I can't remember if I mentioned, but I am going to be doing a spell for abundance, for infinite abundance. And it is important when making a spell jar to stick to one intention. You don't want to have a little bit of this for some money and a little bit of this for some love. When you're doing this, you're gonna get confusion. And you could end up with just a love for money. And that's not what we're trying to do here. So you want to stick with one intention at a time. So what I mean by infinite abundance, what makes me feel abundant in all aspects of my life, so that I am secure and happy and rejoiceful in all ways of life. And that is what I'm trying to draw in with this. The first thing I'm adding is sugar, because I want to attract and sweeten this to me. So you tell each, Tails buddy, you gotta get down. So you tell each item exactly what it's for. So, to sweeten. If you don't have a funnel, you can make a paper cone. Or if you have, I guess I could have just poured that in there. That was really unnecessary. Whatever, we're here now. I was gonna add some chamomile flowers. Chamomile is often associated with luck and prosperity. It is used a lot in money spells and abundance spells, so this is perfect for this. And it also is the color gold, which also signifies abundance and wealth and can be seen as a sign or a symbol for abundance. And that's where the kind of chaos magic comes in. It's because that is where my mind is assigning a meaning to this. And so it gives it meaning for me. I have several other items like that were gold and that reminded me of abundance that I'm going to add as well. The next thing, though, before I move on too much, I'm going to add some chamomile roots as well. Again, same properties, but just to keep me rooted in my abundance and for longevity purposes. I want this to be a long-lasting spell. This is not something that I just want to be a one-off. Then I'm going to use a lunar charged quarter. I also have a bay leaf, which I've wrote my intention on, and I have a sigil on the back, so I'm going to place this in here as well. We are going to add some cinnamon logs here, or cinnamon sticks, to strengthen the spell. Cinnamon is a symbol of fire, which adds the power in. The next thing I have here is some rose petals that I've dried. These are gold again, for an abundance. I'm going to add, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on here, but the fibers and just the texture of this flower was really beautiful. And it struck me as like gold and beautiful gold hues, textures. So I'm gonna add that in here as well. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to add in here were some little buttercups. If you've ever seen buttercups that have just bloomed in the sun, sometimes they get this sheen to them. They look like they have tiny little diamonds all over them, or they're made of gold. And that's why I wanted to incorporate some of them here in this spell as well. And again, I guess you could classify that more under the chaos magic, because I am assigning a new intent to it based on how it makes me feel. So, this is one way to make a spell jar. But before I close it and I seal it, I always like to breathe a breath of life into it. And this is kind of a way of activating the jar or the spell and breathing my life into it, giving it life, activating it. It is at its activation point now. So mote it be. Then you will seal it with wax around the top. You can use corresponding colors. I'm going to heat up some green wax to pour over, and voila, you have a spell jar for infinite abundance. And again, you do not have to use these ingredients. I really just wanted to show you the basics of sitting down and crafting a spell jar. It is still very nostalgic for me to do this because every time I do, I think about the very first time that I did. And I think a lot of witches can relate that this was one of their earliest experiences with spellcrafting. I know for me it was one of my earliest things that I had made. And it's just exciting to just sit down and be like, wow, I'm really doing this. So I think this is a great way to get started, but again, I still think that you can utilize spell jars in a lot of different ways. And for an example of my smaller spell jars, I will use smaller ones like this and hang them in different places. I hope this video helped. I hope you feel you have a better basic understanding of a spell jar. If you want to see more videos like this or more spell crafting, if you have any suggestions, let me hear. What are your methods for making spell jars? I would love to know. Thank you so much again, like I said, for helping me reach this milestone. I am just feeling really excited and really optimistic for the future here. And I just can't thank you enough for being here and being a part of it with me. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed making these spells. They're a lot of fun and they're a really beautiful way of charging our intentions. And as I said, in place of the bay leaf, you could add sigils or petitions. There are just many different aspects of things that you can incorporate into your jar spells. So don't let your research stop here. And speaking of research, don't forget to look into the Lionsgate portal. That will be happening until about the 12th to the 18th. It is very powerful stuff, and I think this is a great time for manifestations, for setting intentions, for spell work, and for working on our highest self and our highest mind. I am so excited and just humbled that I get to be a part of your path and your journey. And thank you again for being a part of mine. Until next time, bless.